Part 1. IPCC Authorship.
Well, who really writes IPCC reports? One category is 20-something graduate students.
Now I tried to look up the actual numbers. Donna doesn't seem to talk about them anywhere. Are we talking 10 graduate students? 20 graduate students? There are more than 800 authors to the IPCC reports. Furthermore, are these authors sitting by themselves in a vacuum? No, their work is being assessed and critiqued by professional scientists. Does their age really come into it? I know that I'm about half the age of Lord Monckton. I only have a Bachelor of Science, but I'm dead certain that my work better represents the science than his own.
Now, another category is people who come from the right country or the right gender.
So with an environmental problem that affects every person, man, woman and child, across the entire globe, we shouldn't include a cross-section of the entire globe? What is she really saying there? That this is a problem that only the developed world have any say in?
So, another category, we have professional activists writing chapters of the IPCC reports. So Richard Moss has been involved with the IPCC for 20 years. He's an American.
So is that Dr. Richard Moss?
And we have Bill Hare. Now, if you go on the internet, you can find a blog post on Greenpeace's website that calls Hare a Greenpeace legend.
That's Dr. Bill Hare, the physicist and environmental scientist.
More professional activists. We have Michael Oppenheimer. He's an American scientist. He spent more than 20 years employed by the Environmental Defense Fund, which is a very wealthy, very influential U.S. green NGO.
That's Professor Michael Oppenheimer, Professor of Geosciences and International Affairs.
And Jennifer Morgan. Jennifer Morgan is also involved in the current report preparation, and she used to be the World Wildlife Fund's chief spokesman on climate change. She looks like a very fun, very pleasant person, but she is not one of the world's finest scientific minds.
And finally, one of them that actually isn't a scientist. Of course, she has a career history of reviewing and reporting on the scientific literature. Does that make her qualified to review and report on the science? I'll leave you to decide. Does she really have a point criticising the interests of the individual? For instance, would we want a taxi driver who cares about the road rules? Or a surgeon who cares about preserving human life? How about a police officer who cares about public safety? Does that make them biased? Would we expect or even want them to be totally impartial? When it comes to science, this is why we keep on coming back to peer review. It doesn't matter how passionate your work is. It doesn't matter how enthusiastic you are. If your work's rubbish, your peers are going to chew it to pieces. It's not going to stand cross-examination.
Where are the open letters signed by groups of scientists? We have seen all kinds of open letters from scientists in recent years about what governments should be doing to combat climate change. Where were the open letters saying, you know, we support the IPCC, but the public should know that they're being misled about some of these issues? No one spoke up.
So why aren't there any open letters from scientists? Maybe perhaps they have the qualifications and technical training to actually review the scientific literature themselves. Then they've looked at the IPCC reports and found that it actually represents where the science is currently sitting. Why would they be up in arms about that?